They called themselves the founders of democracy, the land of philosophers, poets, and marble temples, the place where Socrates walked, where Aristotle taught, and where ideas of freedom were born. But beneath the polished marble and shining statues of Athens, there was a world of shadows, a world where justice wasn't about fairness. It was about power. And for women, especially women, punishment was never private. It was public, violent, meant to burn itself into memory. This is not the Greece of heroic myths. This is the Greece of humiliation, where public shame was the ultimate weapon of control in the ancient world. When a city fell, the war was never truly over. For the men who survived, chains or swords awaited. But for the women, a slower and crueler battle began. When victors marched through conquered cities, women were dragged from their homes, their jewelry ripped off, their clothes torn away. They weren't seen as people anymore. They were the symbols of defeat. The conquerors knew exactly what they were doing. Humiliating the women of a defeated city wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. It sent a clear message: we own not only your land, we own your honor. Women were paraded through the streets, naked or half-clothed, displayed like war trophies before a cheering crowd. Their tears weren't hidden. Their humiliation was public, deliberate, and unforgettable. For the Greeks, breaking a woman's dignity meant breaking an entire community's soul. Not all punishments in Greece involved swords, whips, or shackles. Some of the cruelest punishments came from the most ordinary objects. In Athens, when a woman was accused of adultery or what they called improper behavior, she could be subjected to a punishment that was both grotesque and unforgettable: the radish and the fig. The ritual began in public. The woman was dragged into the Agora, the bustling marketplace. Merchants, philosophers, farmers, and children gathered around. There was no privacy. She was stripped from the waist down. Her hands were pinned. Her face was exposed to the sun, to the dust, and to the stares. Then a common vegetable, a hard radish or a dried fig, was used as an instrument of humiliation. This was no accident. The object was chosen because it turned the act into a joke, a mockery. The punishment wasn't just physical. It was meant to turn her body into a public spectacle. The magistrate would read her crime, adultery, seduction, or dishonor, and then, slowly, deliberately, the act would begin. Pain would ripple through her body, but what hurt more was the sound of the crowd. Laughter, whispers, spitting, shaming. The pain faded eventually. The humiliation didn't. In a society where reputation was everything, this one act destroyed a woman's name forever. If the radish punishment was short and sharp, bodizo was its long, slow sibling designed to torture both body and spirit. Bodizo was the punishment of public exposure. The condemned woman was tied upright to a wooden post in the Agora. Her clothes were torn off or stripped entirely, leaving her body vulnerable under the hot Mediterranean sun. This was no dungeon, no hidden cell. This was the center of the city. Crowds didn't gather out of pity. They gathered to watch. Neighbors who once greeted her, friends, strangers, men she'd passed on the street, even children. They watched her body burn, blister, and weaken. The guards did nothing then because their silence was part of the punishment. Every second she stood there erased a piece of her dignity. People threw insults, spit, or hurled bits of food. Some laughed. Others just stared coldly. For a society obsessed with modesty and female honor, this was the ultimate degradation. Even after the ropes were untied, the whispers followed her home. The shame wasn't just for her. It poisoned her family, her children, her future. In ancient Greece, a woman's hair wasn't just a style. It was her crown, a symbol of her status, her femininity, her identity. That's why shaving a woman's head was one of the most humiliating punishments of all. Accused of adultery, disobeying a husband or guardian, the punishment was simple: strip her hair away in front of everyone. Locks fell like silent tears to the ground. Every snip of the blade was like tearing away a piece of her identity. Unlike a beating, this punishment didn't end that day. Her shaven head branded her. For weeks or months, she couldn't walk through the city without people knowing what had happened. She became a walking reminder of her shame. For enslaved women, it was even worse. A shaved head was used as a permanent mark of ownership, a cruel sign that they were not human in the eyes of the state. What made these punishments so devastating wasn't just the pain. It was the way they outlived the moment. In Greece, reputation was everything. A man's honor was tied to his wife's reputation. A family's future was tied to a woman's body. One public humiliation could destroy an entire bloodline standing. The whispers, the looks, the quiet cruelty of a city that never forgets. It was a punishment that didn't just target a woman's body. It rewrote her existence. Today, when we think of ancient Greece, we see marble statues, great thinkers, and the birthplace of democracy. But behind those statues stood women who had no voice. Behind those speeches on justice were punishments that silenced half the population. The Greeks believed shame was more powerful than death. Because when you humiliate someone, you don't just end their life. You erase their name, their pride, their place in history. This is the side of history rarely carved in stone. A world where power was written on women's bodies. A world where humiliation was a weapon sharper than any sword. And if we remember the philosophers, we must also remember the women who suffered in silence.